Greetings, my excellent friend. Welcome to the Heavy Metal History Report.
Well, cool, man. Let's get right into it here. Ladies and gentlemen, listeners of the podcast, joining me on this episode is Dylan, the singer and noise man behind Full of Hell. Dylan, thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me, man.
Hell yeah. So, I guess as you listen, the thing that I like to start out with to kind of get the conversation rolling, man, I always like hearing people's beginnings of, you know, what got them into heavy metal, what their inspirations were, those first records they remember hearing, and like how they heard them. So what were those for you personally?
You know, for me, I think I came up more in the punk realm first, just because my parents were into a lot of like the late 70s, like, you know, early punk scene. And I think my first exposure to like proper metal definitely came through like a label like Hydra Head at the time, who were pushing a lot of post metal, and they had Exaster on the label. So that might have been my first experience with black metal. It's really hard to remember. But, you know, like finding a band like Discordance Axis was like a pretty early exposure to metal for me. And that, of course, led to like Napalm Death and then so on and so forth. And Cryptopsy was definitely one of the first metal bands I ever heard as well. There was a band in my high school when I was like a freshman, and this band, they were like obsessed with basically just Dying Fetus and None So Vile era Cryptopsy.
Nice.
And one of those dudes is still like a close friend of mine, and we're still both very into metal. And I just remember seeing their band at the time, and he was totally trying to do a Lord Worm thing. And I honestly, at 14, I didn't know that like a 15-year-old could make noises like that. It just kind of, you know, I was very underexposed to metal specifically.
Yeah.
And after I heard that, it was like, I was so fucking sold.
Yeah.
It probably somewhere around there then.
You know, it's funny you mentioned getting into punk first, because I'm a big proponent of, you know, punk rock and metal kind of being like cousins with each other, because, you know, without one, you wouldn't have hardcore, because it's the fusion of the two, like punk and thrash, that kind of made hardcore. And I feel like they're synonymous with each other in some aspects, even though there was always that weird divide with punk kids and metal kids in the 80s. I think a lot of that crossover stuff, that's where it started though too.
Oh yeah, dude. A lot of the really, all the great old school death metal bands, at least as far as I've encountered in my time with my band, those guys are all like DIY as fuck, and they came up in like punk and hardcore. Immolation is like a perfect example of how punk and metal kind of seamlessly intermix, at least, you know, ethically.
Yeah.
I had this moment where I was chilling with the Immolation guys. We were in New York City at a show, and I was just hanging out with Ross and Bob, and there were these other two New York guys down there with them. And sorry, got something in my throat. And it was some old New York hardcore. It was some old New York hardcore guys, and it just like completely came full circle in my head, seeing like these veterans of death metal. They grew up going to Typo Negative shows and like, you know, a lot of the old New York hardcore shows. They knew like Warzone and all those bands, and I don't know, it just clicked for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think they're very interrelated, you know, with how the bands operate and otherwise.
Yeah, and those two guys, man, they are like one of my favorite like death metal guitarists. He has such a unique playing style that like you hear it, you're like, oh, that's a Ross Dolan riff right there. You know, it's just such a fucking I try to explain that to people. Yeah,
it's unreal. They're like such an inspiring band in pretty much every way to me. Like how they carried themselves and how challenging and dark their music is. I think it says something when music stands the test of time to a lot of people, you know, in different ways. But I'm still impressed when like a band like Immolation's like early material is still just so extreme, even in the face of whatever's the most extreme thing today.
Yeah, that's something I've noticed myself, that, you know, in kind of doing like this podcast, aside from interviews, you know, when I'm like researching bands, there's a lot of stuff that, you know, came out like, you know, 98, 94 that got overlooked, or people just really don't remember. And like, I'll go back and listen to it and I'm like, wait. This is so crushing that if it came out today, I think that it would just like blow up, you know, but it got the unfortunate expense of coming out before its time and kind of getting left behind, so to speak?
Well, I think a lot of people really gravitate towards a lot of those old demos too, because those demos were made when a lot of those bands were like pretty young and still figuring their shit out. And from everything that I've heard from older guys, there really wasn't there wasn't any replication of style because the styles were still forming. So those guys were just trying to make like their own thing.
Yeah.
And when they're so young, like the demo's always like a little raw. And in my opinion, a lot of times it sounds more rabid and like fucked up that way. So that's like a huge reason why I think that stands the test of time with people, because those early recordings are like them at their most primitive. And I think that's like an important aspect of it.
Yeah. And I think too, with Full of Hell, you can definitely say that about like your guys' early recordings. 'Cause it's like the kind of raw form of where you guys are now, like sonically, like you can hear it. It's just not quite there yet. Not that it's bad or anything. I know I'm making it sound like it's terrible or something like that.
No. I completely agree with you.
Yeah, because like every time I do one of these, like I refresh my brain by just like listening to something nonstop to kind of like wrap my brain around like the evolution of the band's music and everything like that, and just listening to that first record and then going to Trumpeting Ecstasy and then the new tracks. It's you can definitely hear like the smidgen like sound aspects of like where you guys would go over the course of like your records.
I'm glad you feel that way. It's honestly really hard for me and Spencer, I'm sure, to kind of go back and listen to the old records. Because over like 9 years you learn, you grow with your bandmates, and we had like that idea in our heads, and it shifted and changed a little over the years, but like as we got experience recording and touring, I think we are able to progress in a way that we're content with the records as they are, because they're out there forever now. But it's hard to go back and listen to like the embryonic periods of a band, especially when it's your own stuff sometimes.
Yeah, and because I mean at that point too, you're still kind of formulating the idea of the music you're trying to get out, especially in the early days of a band. And I think that's the great thing about bands that take chances and evolve over time. There's always going to be some radical shift at some point. And
yeah, dude,
taking those chances is what's important.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bands that I'm a huge fan of that have like really evolved over the course of their discographies. And like you get pockets of people that are into particular portions of the discography. Yeah. And, others are only into like the latter albums or the earliest albums. And I think that's pretty exciting. I don't know. There's a lot of reward to someone that's willing to dive into something that when it's like that thick.
Yeah. And you guys are just now getting there. So this is going to be your fourth full length, right? Or third, fourth, fifth? I lost count myself.
I should know this offhand, but I think it's the fourth. It's the fourth.
Yeah,
because
that's what I thought too.
I really had to think about that for a second and make sure I wasn't counting. Sometimes people count the Merzbow collaboration, and sometimes they count the Body collabs. So, yeah, fourth's like standalone proper LP.
Damn.
Yeah,
that's got to be pretty cool because you guys are also coming up on like almost 10 years of being a band too, right?
Yeah, man. It's weird that it's been that long.
Yeah.
I mean, it simultaneously feels like a very long road and like yesterday.
Yeah, I was talking to an old like touring friend of mine who I had on the podcast, and like we hadn't seen or really talked to each other in 10 years either. And then we just started talking and we were like, man, it really doesn't feel like 10 years now that we're kind of like catching up like this. And, I'm sure with like everything that you guys have done in terms of like recording and playing all these shows, it's just your fourth album, and to get 4 albums out in 10 years, that's pretty damn good.
Yeah, I guess so. It all depends on the band. The bands that we're inspired by, at least on the punk side of things, with Power Violence and everything, a lot of those bands are extremely prolific. Like Man is a Bastard and Bastard Noise. Eric Wood's put out so many brilliant albums just, under a couple of those monikers that he's clearly got like just an overwhelming amount of ideas in his head. And so it's not even like we worked so hard to put out 4 albums in 10 years. It was like it was just kind of fun, and we are always writing. So there's always EPs and splits and stuff. So I don't know. I agree with you, but it's definitely just more comes like naturally. It's not like like an achievement in my head, at least.
Yeah, and I think too, you also get a more kind of authentic product when you're not like trying to rush stuff out constantly. Yeah, I think it's also a really good idea when bands do splits and EPs, especially nowadays, because you don't put out a record for X amount of time and people forget so quickly or move on to the next thing. That always having some music out there, I feel is a good idea, and you guys are really good about that too.
Yeah, it's advantageous. I don't even know if we ever really thought about it like that, but I completely agree. And, I've thought about that in retrospect, but it's like the spirit of DIY and like this communal nature of like the genres that we kind of like move around in. Splits are like a way of bringing something together with your friends, like a common idea. And the collabs obviously is like the ultimate example of like communal, like working together between two bands, all that good vibe.
Yeah, that was something I was curious about too, because it seems like you guys, Thou, The Body, all collaborate with just so many people, and the music and product that you kind of get out of it, the art side of it is awesome, and you can kind of tell that each band has kind of grown from those collaborations too.
Yeah, man, it's a really cool thing, and it's funny because Spencer and I, when we first formed the band, we would always have like, when we were on tour and shit was like really terrible, or if it was really good, we always had these talks about like where we envisioned the band going if we were able to keep going and writing records. And I don't remember ever, at least on my end, I don't remember ever discussing doing a collaboration. So the thing with Merzbow kind of fell into our laps, and it was like a huge challenge in a way, because we didn't know what was expected of us necessarily, and we were really intimidated to work with this dude Masami Sounds.
Yeah,
he's a total fucking like heavyweight legend, and we were just like kids, so that was like kind of a mixed experience, just because it was kind of a mystery. But as we started doing them with The Body, and it was The Body's idea to collaborate with us, because that's just kind of like what they do. They're like masters of that.
They are, man.
After doing the records with The Body, it kind of just became part of our DNA, I think. And now we really enjoy it. It's definitely, I'm glad you feel like all the bands kind of glean a little bit of like inspiration or knowledge from each other when we do these, because that's how I really feel about us, at least. It's like we were able to get so much from those 3 albums.
I can imagine.
With The Body,
yeah,
it opens your mind, because they work in a completely different way. They're like a really unique duo to work with. It's not really like making records with anybody else, I think.
Yeah, there's something to be said about like collaborating on an artistic level with somebody, because at some point you're so kind of stuck in your own little box or mindset of what you guys are trying to accomplish, that when something else comes in to kind of change that artistic vision, it kind of opens up other pathways to what you guys could be doing. And it just kind of like, at least from what I assume like you guys are doing, I'm not speaking to like other bands and everything like that, but yeah, it's just seeing that inspiration or cohesion come from like working with all the other bands and the musicians, that kind of opens up more avenues for you guys, songwriting wise.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. And if you have an open mind and patience, to have someone come into like this little bubble that you have for yourself when you record records, because it's a really kind of, I think it can be a very stressful situation when you come down to the wire recording an album, because there's so much money on the line and there's a time limit, and you're hoping that it comes out of your head the way you want. Like I feel like there can be significant pressure if you have the wrong perspective. But if you're able to go in with people, generally, hopefully people you care about and like being around, and you're able to share ideas in like a cooperative way, it can be a really cool experience. And I've learned a lot from The Body. I'm really grateful for that. Like, we definitely do things on our current records that we never would have done if we hadn't been in a room with those guys a whole bunch making other songs,
So what kind of stuff did they like open your eyes up to like experiment with?
Well, we got this a little from Balazs Pandey, the drummer from Merzbow as well, and from Merzbow, I guess it would be the concept of kind of improvisation, I guess, but in a sense, and not just in like a direct performing live kind of sense, but kind of being able to go into a studio without, tightly wound songs written or any songs at all, and on the spot being able to just kind of communicate and create something from the ground up that is cohesive. I guess like delivering on the spot, you know what I mean? Because that's not our style. We like to prepare like to an extreme degree before we go into the studio, so it doesn't take much time.
Yeah.
And we didn't take much time with these body records either, but it was just like, those guys are brilliant when they get into the studio. The idea is just, they come one way or the other, and they're always great. And so I guess that's the main difference.
And I think that does help elevate everybody's musicians too. If you're working with somebody that's so able to like pull off that just on the spot kind of inspiration, I think it just pushes everybody else to that next level, like that iron sharpens iron kind of vibe.
Yeah, man, it definitely keeps you on your toes. Because writer's block's like totally a thing, no matter who you are at some point. And exercising your brain in a way that is out of your comfort zone, it can produce, really cool results and just be like a good growth for you, I think, generally speaking.
Yeah. So in your opinion, why do you think more bands don't collaborate that way? Do you think it's because of like people wanting too much to just stick to their own genre and their own thing? Or, I've kind of pondered this myself lately, just like why more bands, I see bands like getting like guest solos or guest guitar players and stuff like that, which is a form of collaboration, but I don't know. I think like what you guys and Thou and The Body do, it makes it much more interesting kind of seeing that difference of music kind of blend together.
I don't think there's an umbrella answer to that at all. Mm-hmm. I think, you could probably find a subset of people that would choose not to collaborate simply because it was hard enough to find a few people that even like the same music that they do to jam with them in their own band. You know what I mean? They have a hard enough time, not even just like it's too hard for them to do, but like human beings are difficult. So I think we're very lucky that we found a couple people that we were willing to do something like that with. People like Chip and Lee and people like the guys in Thou and, others that collaborate like that so frequently. I think they're pretty rare. So we're fortunate to know those people. And, if it hadn't have been for Lee reaching out to me, I would never have done those albums with The Body. Not that I wouldn't have wanted to, but I just wouldn't have crossed my mind,
Yeah.
It wasn't something we'd planned for ourselves. And I don't think it's as common in metal as it is in hip hop, where everybody is collaborating all the time. So I think maybe, especially with The Body, because Lee is so inspired by genres outside of metal mostly, I think his brain just works a little differently. He has more of like in a weird way, like almost like a pop sensibility with how he writes his music. And he's definitely influenced like outside of the spectrum of metal, mostly, by pop artists or hip hop artists and how they do things. And I think that just kind of creates a unique situation with him. So there's like too many factors at play to really say why more people don't collaborate.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you. It's definitely a hard thing to kind of pull off. You're not going to have like Cannibal Corpse with Immolation, even though it might sound fucking fantastic. Who knows? It's I don't know. Just kind of one of those what if things.
Yeah, and there's like tons of people that it's not in their wheelhouse. They don't want to do that. Like
True.
Cannibal and Immolation wouldn't even want to collaborate. They'd see no point. I'm just saying they'd probably see no point in doing that.
Yeah,
and that's cool. There's no knocking that. It's not for everybody, and that's probably another reason why you don't see more of that. There probably aren't a lot of musicians that are particularly interested in like 8 people getting in one room and all throwing random ideas at each other.
Yeah. No, I mean, you make a great point. Just
I would love to see more collaborations.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like on one hand, like I definitely agree with you. Like there's not a lot of bands that are gonna like take that chance and do that. But I always think the outcomes are generally really good when bands do try that. At least in my opinion. But
yeah.
Go ahead.
Best collaborations to me come from bands that maybe have more of an unorthodox sound. Like Sun is a good example of a band that is genius when they collaborate. I love hearing the Sun formula kind of molded around other artists like Boris or Scott Walker or over, whatever it might be. Or even when they have like Exaster sing with them, the Sun formula is like very powerful and, simple and focused in its direction. And because of that, I think it adapts like, so it could be applied to so many different other sounds that I think the doors open for those to sound brilliant. I think the more like, I don't know, overwhelming the sound of the band is, maybe the more difficult it would be to collaborate. With Us in the Body, I think the Body's formula, it's not simple, but a lot of times it's very stripped down, and because of that, it's so flexible, and that's like part of the genius of it, is that they're able to do records with just about anybody, and it could sound really, really fantastic because of that. So it's definitely just a certain kind of band that I think it's conducive to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing you see too is like, you just see, I guess for lack of a better term, these super groups pop up where it's like, oh, this person from this band and this person from this band and this person from this band. Instead of just like collaborating, they just make a whole new band, and then it's like, well,
and that's valid too.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. It's interesting the steps people take to kind of like not want to collaborate. But then again, you know, let's look at the worst case scenario here, like the Metallica Lulu album, you know?
Yeah, dude, that's like the black hole of bad disasters. Like that's like the singularity of awful.
Yeah. So
but at the same time, ironically enough, I mean, the results are like worth having in this world because they're hilarious. But yeah, that's like the worst scenario.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, man.
It sucks.
But
I don't think all the pairing, you know, and not like any pairing in the universe will work. I think it's like specific things. Like there's bands that we're very good friends with that are amazing bands that I don't think we would together would make a particularly engaging collab record. Like there probably is no reason for it.
Yeah.
You know, but there's a lot of examples. You know, it can't just be anything, I think.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, the spirit of collaboration has to be on both sides, and you know, if you're just trying to do it just to do it, that'll kind of take away from like the authenticity a little bit too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree.
So are you guys one of those bands where pretty much after you're done with a record, you are already like immediately writing another one, or do you guys kind of take time to let that one kind of marinate a little bit before you start writing?
We don't really go about it in any intentional kind of way, but I guess the track record is that we're usually writing stuff before the record comes out. This time around, I don't think anybody's written anything. We're definitely pretty heavy in discussion about our next couple collaboration records that we want to do.
Nice.
And those will take a while. I think hopefully maybe we could record one of those at the end of the year. And I don't really want to spoil the surprise because that's like, you know, the whole fun of it for me.
Yeah.
But I guess that's where our head's at now. And because of the way we like to do collabs now, we probably won't have to write. But I imagine Spencer's going to be writing songs, you know, in the next few months when we're not touring.
Damn. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, that if you're always inspired or like in that creative mode to write anyways, I feel like it's just easier, you know, to keep up with it instead of just waiting until like, oh, we need to do another record or start another record.
Oh yeah, dude. Being forced to write music is definitely extremely difficult. Spencer definitely had a time frame at least locked in his mind when we were going to record this. And there was a time where there was a time frame set and he still had a couple songs to write. Now that was like a year apart almost, but he still, you know, experienced some stress knowing that he had a time frame now where he had to finish songs that he deemed like good enough to make it to the record. Cause he's pretty discerning as far as his taste goes when he's writing songs for our records. He's pretty hard on himself at times, which is a good thing. But yeah, man, it can be difficult to force that stuff, I think.
Yeah, and I think if you force it in the long run, you're going to be a little less happy with it because you'll always be like, oh man, that's not what I wanted, but I just had to get it out there to get it out there.
Yeah, and that's probably a horrible feeling. I mean, there are definitely lots of records that we've done where I didn't think to do certain things in the studio that I wish I would have done. And I just have to let that go though, and try to avoid that in the future. And I've gotten better with that, you know, especially with this most recent one that's going to come out. It's definitely hard to rush and to capture everything you want.
So I guess kind of after Trumpeting Ecstasy was kind of out for a while and you guys are ready to start working on the next thing, what do you do to kind of like get in that headspace of like writing and creating, or are you just always there?
I'm definitely on the school of like not forcing the creative writing, because a lot of these songs are so short that I try to write like pretty dense lyrics, but I don't like to force it. So my general way of doing things is just to kind of always have my phone on me, and if a line like pops into my head, or a particular phrase that I think might make a really nice song title, and I think most guys probably do it this way, but I'll just copy it into my notes. And when there isn't a deadline set, that's nice, because I compile all of these starting motifs or ideas or whatever, and by the time I actually have to really start to hammer on it, hopefully I have a lot of raw materials to work with. That way, because the pressure absolutely 100% does not work for me. I can't write anything that's I think is good enough if there's like a tight deadline ahead of me.
Yeah.
So I think especially with something like lyrics, because in death metal a lot of times I think you could find that sometimes the lyrics almost have like placeholder value. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Especially if the vocals are really indecipherable. I think like a large percentage of listeners probably don't intimately read the lyrics over and over again and learn them. So because of that, you think maybe there'd be a little less pressure, because you could argue that the lyrics matter a little less than everything else because there is no real guideline to it. But that tends to stress me out a little more, because since there's no like black and white rule of what matters and what doesn't with the lyrics, my own opinion is becomes the only one that matters. So if I feel a little off about it, it has to be terrible. So yeah, I like to just have a lot of time to write. And as far as like noise with the songs go, that's a lot simpler, because Spencer does the majority of the songwriting, and as he's writing, he's got a vision in his head for how he wants the electronics to sound or what he wants to put where. So when I get demos from him, they usually come with some notes from him discussing what kind of electronic sounds he wants, if he wants any. And in the studio, I'll get more of a free run as well if I've thought of anything while demoing. And we kind of hash that back and forth, though. We both have to be okay with it for it to fly. But that's another thing. There may be wrong ways to do that as well, but it's a little more open to interpretation. So that can sometimes be higher pressure in weird ways.
I think too, with like the noise aspect of the music, you're taking a real chance there too of things not being harmonious, which is a weird thing to say considering like how almost disharmonious some of the songs are in terms of like aggression factor,
Mm-hmm.
So that's a, I guess, formula in itself, trying to get those two to match up to a way that suits, what you're hearing and what he's kind of hearing, and do you guys like kind of come to like an agreement, or do you listen back to everything?
Well, a lot of the placement with the noise comes from Spencer, I think, originally, and I'll just kind of have a little bit of liberty with it. Mm-hmm. And there's always like a specific, I guess, having some knowledge of the genre and of a genre like power violence that bands like Man is the Bastard, again, I'll reference, and the Endless Blockade, who's like a slightly newer band than that band, but is long defunct and was a big influence on us. The formulas that they kind of set forth with how they layered noise onto their songs, those were like such a perfect starting template for us to learn where we sat, in terms of being influenced by them. And, I guess it's like the vision that he has in his head, or the vision I have in mine in regards to what will work. If we want like a really heavy wall noise mm-hmm. to overcome like X guitar part, or some power electronics thing that is like really clicky in this specific sort of way where he knows I can make that noise, and it has to like rhythmically line up with X part, or we want some like junk electronics. It varies in specificity, but that's like, those are the parts that you could probably liken more to like a free jazz kind of vibe, because there's a lot of flexibility in what you're able to do, especially live. Like after you've recorded it, the ground point, and there are limits to what you should be doing, so it doesn't overpower. But there's like freedom,
Yeah, that's a good point. Because you were talking earlier about like the kind of freestyle aspect of it, and I'm sure live that comes out a lot more with like the noise part of it, I would assume, right?
Yeah, like if there's a section where I'm like just banging metal rods onto some spring coils with like a reverb and a distortion on a record in this really specific way, I'm not guaranteed to get exactly the same sound live that I need, but that's not really the point. And like I said, there's limitations to that. We definitely try to keep it dialed in. And we're not even we have more noise in a band without noise, but I still think the ratio is definitely like a little low for the electronics. Like it could be way harsher and more overpowering. So I think it's done like in a pretty subtle way generally. I know people that are not into noise might disagree with me, but I mean it's generally kind of sparing.
I think it works
when it goes loud.
You know, because like you guys definitely have an ambiance to the music, especially with the past couple records, and you know the way that's kind of creeped in over time. It's made the music sound really dark compared to what it used to sound like. You know, especially with Trumpeting Ecstasy, man. Like, I didn't know what to expect with that album personally, so when it came out, it was so vastly different from the record before that I was just like enthralled with it for months. You know, just like picking apart kind of like aspects of the aggression versus the noise and the, you know, the slow parts. You know, I don't know, that's just me with music in general, but it was such a step up from everything. And you could kind of see it too. You know, we were talking about the collaborations. I think that's where part of that kind of came from, in my opinion. So
yeah,
that was the record that really, like, I felt like captured everything you guys are really working towards. And now with the new record, I've only heard the one song so far, but I'm expecting just an even more kind of like depressing feeling from the record in some aspects, and not depressing like sad, just like, I don't know, there's a real ambiance to the records. I know I keep using that word, but there's definitely
I really appreciate you saying that. I mean, I felt like Trumpeting in a lot of ways for me was like our first record. Like we definitely probably came out on the other end of those collaborations a little bit smarter than we were before them, without a doubt. You know, just we'd gotten more experience. We had a lot of people talk shit on us, and it thickened our skin. And then we came full circle to just kind of doing what we wanted to do for ourselves, and that was a really nice feeling, you know. And then when you couple that with more experience in the studio, I was definitely more pleased with Trumpeting than anything else we've done to that point. And I feel that way about Weeping Choir too. And I you know, it's hard to judge a record a part of it or whatever, but I definitely think it's more of like a mourning kind of record, like a very depressing record. So hopefully it doesn't disappoint you.
I don't think it will. Well, I mean, like, so when you guys are kind of crafting the music and stuff and like trying to get these soundscapes, are you kind of consciously looking for that kind of feeling of what you're thinking of, or is it just kind of like that was the outcome of everything that you guys did and it wasn't conscious at all?
It's just happenstance. That's my hope going in, but because of all the moving pieces, we're never really sure how it's going to turn out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no more than we did 9 years ago in terms of like going to the studio, but there's still so much to learn, I'm sure, and we're still very anxious when we go in. We're just hoping we can make something that's decent enough that it kind of reflects what we were hoping for. But yeah, I mean, I think it's unintentional, and there's more emotion, I think, creeping into guitar parts and stuff like that nowadays than before. So generally, I'm like pretty psyched when we get into the studio, because my demos sound like a Darkthrone demo, and they're really lo-fi, so it's hard for me to tell some of the definition.
Yeah.
In the guitar parts. So when I go to the studio, sometimes I'm just like really surprised, because you know, maybe something changed like the week before we went in that I didn't hear, or I'm just like hearing the notes for the first time. So there's definitely a level of surprise too, for me at least. Not for those guys. I just live pretty far away from them, so I'm not always up to speed.
So when I was talking to Mike from Inter Arma, you know, I kind of asked him this question, because I actually, surprisingly enough, don't get to talk to vocalists that much when doing this. Especially guys that like write lyrics and stuff. And for some reason, it clicked in my head to ask him this. And I kind of want to ask you, or I do want to ask you the same thing. You know, do you do a lot of reading, or like what kind of literature kind of inspires you personally.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up reading a whole lot, and I think I still read, fairly frequently.
Mm-hmm.
And literature definitely plays a huge aspect in like drawing inspiration from, just drawing inspiration from, what I'm reading at the time. Like this latest record, I finally got around to like a Tolkien reference with Silmaril.
Oh, nice.
I always try to like get a really striking image with a song title, and Silmaril or Silmarillion, those two had been in the bank where I just wanted to use them for so long, and it finally was fitting. And there's also a song title that references a never-ending story. It's another great, a great novel and film from my childhood. It was just really important to me, and the fantasy of it kind of like still stuck in my head. Yeah, I mean, it just depends what I'm reading at the time. It always usually bleeds in a little bit. Definitely.
Do you feel like you personally try to put like a lot of yourself into it, like personal aspect of it, or do you try to kind of be a little bit more vague about what you write?
It's changed over the years. When we first started, I think a lot of the lyrics were pretty one-dimensional. Maybe not one-dimensional, but a lot closer to being one-dimensional than they are nowadays, and they were definitely more introverted.
Mm-hmm.
It's gotten more veiled over the years as I've wanted to try and build like a larger like arc narrative to things. I wanted it to be something that maybe would take a little effort to read into, rather than just being so deliberate. I just like, I don't have any problem with deliberate lyrics. I think it's important, but it's just it's not my thing. So the metaphor and allegory became extremely important to me. I think it'll be even more so in the future. So yeah, it's never direct anymore. It's very outside of myself.
Yeah, and I guess it shows also like your growth as a writer and musician as well, that you finally like got to that point in your style.
Yeah, and like found something that works for me that I'm at least content with, So yeah, it's definitely it's a natural feeling for me to write like that, for sure.
So when you guys went to the studio, about how long in between like kind of writing stuff to recording was like the time amount there?
I feel like we took like a year and a half maybe to write the whole record. Nice. Yeah, so that's actually the most time we've ever taken to write a record. And that was like with a ton of touring. So, it was a pretty big space of time where we were just kind of nebulous, like floating, and then when we were in the studio, it took us like 5 days, maybe a little less to record the record.
Nice.
Which is pretty quick for us. We generally like tend to book 10 days when we do an LP, and then we've never used 10 days. I think trumpeting took like 7. So it was funny because everybody was, really anxious about fitting in this record in 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that anxiety lended itself positively to everybody, and everybody came really prepared. It was kind of funny because we were just kind of like, I hope we can do this in time, and we were like, oh, we'll probably be good. It'll be fine, and try not to worry about it. And then things just went so fast. So that was nice.
Yeah, that's got to be a good feeling too, when you're just like expecting the worst and then the best happens as far as like time crunch.
Yeah, man.
And I mean,
when records come out, there's always a time crunch, no matter what.
Yeah. And are you guys still kind of like in that area of like, budgetary like worries and constraints and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's still a budget. With Profound Lore and now with Relapse, the budget's like the same, pretty much. And it's we can within reason, we can do what we want. We're fortunate because we never take a long time to do records.
Mm-hmm.
And Kurt is like, somewhere in the middle range of price with studios. So it's definitely not cheap to record at God City. It's very, very worth it.
Yeah.
But we need X amount of budget to be able to do something like that. But it's pretty modest as far as like recording budgets go for our peers. I think we're on the low side. So I wouldn't say there's much stress there ever. it's just kind of in our wheelhouse to move fast. So we always try to save money.
Yeah, which is good, especially, not that you guys are like a small band, not that you're like a huge band, but like there's like that floor to ceiling, ratio where you kind of have to, do what's best for you guys and still try to come out on top as far as like, getting ready to tour and everything like that, worrying about the record label stuff. So it's
money is finite.
Yeah. All those moving parts, man. It's something I think a lot of people don't realize when, bands are busting their ass to get a record out.
Yeah. You got to work within specific confines. And I think the ones that have been imposed on us are always, really realistic to this point. And, I definitely think, the relationship becomes more reciprocal when we come in under budget for record labels and they're pretty pleased about that usually. But that's like, that's usually our goal. We want things to go efficiently.
Yeah.
That's a pretty general rule of thumb for our band is efficiency.
Do you guys do any, I assume you do pre-production work before going into the studio? Like you mentioned, like getting some of the kind of lo-fi tracks for you.
Yeah, man, we have a pretty complex system for pre-production. So we have you remember that video game Rock Band?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, our drummers had a Rock Band mic from that video game since he was like 15, and he plugs that into the USB drive of his old computer, and he sets it in the middle of the practice room, and then they send those demos to me. And in more recent years, we've had a huge technology upgrade, and I use the external mic on my iPhone when I go down there to get some demos. So that's our pre-production. And then I listen to the demos a little bit, and I record by screaming into the external mic on my laptop in my bathroom. And that's all we do.
That's fun though, man. I mean, just keeping it that really lo-fi sound has got to be interesting to kind of hear it go from that to the final product.
Yeah, and in some ways, the demos are pretty necro. Like, they sound really raw and sick. But yeah, I mean, that's what works for us, though. We've never changed how we did that.
Yeah.
And we're completely prepared when we go into a studio. Like, we're completely ready. Because those three rehearse quite a bit on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And all I really need is to be able to do, like 80%, 90% at tops, like efficiency with, like, the vocal rhythms and stuff. I just need to do that and get that down. Because I don't have a problem with modifying things and changing wording at the last minute. But I need to get those concrete ideas in place and generally have verses or whatever, in place to one degree or another, or else, the stress is really fucking high with me.
Yeah. Cause
it works for us.
Yeah. You don't want to be doing stuff last minute, especially like vocally.
No,
that's gotta be ridiculously hard.
Yeah. Cause it's not fun recording vocals. Like, I enjoy it more than I used to, but I don't know if you sing in a band or if you're in a band and you've seen a guy tracking vocals, but it's really fucking embarrassing because you're screaming dry into a mic. So if anybody's in the room or in the next room, all you hear is this raspy, shitty, especially in my case, because just because of the way I tend to scream, it sounds so fucking embarrassing and bad. And I'll never forget when I was like 14 years old in my first death metal band, and I'd never tracked vocals, and we were doing a demo. And none of those guys had either, I don't think, but it came time to record vocals, and I was really excited.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I started, I was like, this isn't right. This feels so awful. And everybody was fucking laughing at me. And it was mortifying. So I was definitely, I had a bad start with recording vocals. I didn't like it. Like I said, I still don't that much.
Well, I mean, your vocal styles changed a lot over time too. I think in the early days you kind of had this more like hardcore vibe about it, in my opinion, and now it's definitely like the higher kind of screech. And you do the lows as well sometimes, right? Or is that another guy?
Yeah. No, I pretty much track all the vocals on the records. This time we had our bass player do some stuff, but he has like a low register as well. But yeah, when I joined Full of Hell, I was kind of going for more. I was really into pulling teeth, and they were like pretty influential to the approach I took there. And same with the hardcore band that was before that. But when I was in early high school and stuff, it was very high, low. I remember being really into the Black Dahlia Murder in early high school as well.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't even, when I first heard the Black Dahlia Murder, when Unhallowed first came out, I was like 14 maybe or 15 or something like that. But I didn't even know that was two singers when I first heard a song off of that on Pure Volume or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So that was, that I thought that was really cool. So that was definitely cool. And like I said, my peer that was also a singer in a death metal band was just going for Lord Worm, so he was all over the place. And yeah, so it's funny because it feels like I've come full circle to what I was doing when I was a kid, now just trying to make the most amount of noises that I can. And it's way more fun now.
Yeah, so you were talking about Black Dahlia's Unhallowed, man. That, I think me and you were probably around the same age, because I think I was also like 14 or 15 when Unhallowed came out, and that's probably still one of my favorite records of all time. There's something about just every song on that record from front to back.
Yeah, it's a great record, man. And I haven't kept up with them album-wise, but apparently like the peak of their career is a few albums later even. And we've played with them a few times the past like year or so. Mm-hmm. And they sound great live. It's really impressive. That's a band that sounded really sick in the early days, but it seems like they've found like their kind of sound.
Yeah.
People always reference At the Gates when they talk about that riff style, Black Dahlia Murder. But yeah, they definitely like found an identity of their own, in their own way.
Well, I mean, cool. Do you feel like you guys have finally done that, like yourself, as far as Full of Hell goes? Because I think in my opinion, like you guys have definitely like honed in where you want to go, but I also think that too with like future records, you guys could probably do like other amazing shit that like we haven't even heard yet,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's like a sound that's sort of like us at the core. Mm-hmm. I'd like to think that you can tell when it's us playing or whatever, but we're in a pretty fortunate spot. I think we can kind of do whatever we want to do, and we're not even 100% sure what we're going to do next as far as how the records are going to progress. It just depends, over the years we get into different things.
Yeah.
And we always try to blend that into what we're doing. Yeah, I mean, I think the core sound is there though. Hopefully you'll always be able to tell. But if we took a left turn and did something completely off the wall, that wouldn't like completely surprise me. If I was told like in 2 years you're going to do a noise rock record, it wouldn't be like a huge surprise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I feel like we're just going to do what we want to do, and that's all you can really ask for as a person who's in a band is doing what feels right to do.
Yeah. I agree, man. I think that's really important. That's why when I see people talking shit about bands that like maybe did something a little too experimental or out of their taste, it's like, what are you trying to achieve by like knocking the band for taking a chance on something? It's experimentation. It's artistic. Like this is what they felt like writing at that time, and you can't really fault them on that.
Yeah, I mean, people love talking shit. I'm definitely more of the school of just kind of letting the band do what they want to do, yeah. And I can clown it, in amongst my friends, but I'm not going to talk shit on them in a way that would like negatively impact the band, and I'm just not going to judge them. But I also feel like, as stupid as it is, those shit talking opinions are still valid. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like, who the fuck are they? What records are they making that they feel validated and being kind of cruel with how disappointed they are and like where their favorite band's discography has gone. That's going to exist forever, though. That's just how it is.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing.
Yeah, there's no right and wrong. At the end of the day, it's the band's choice, and they're going to succeed or fail based on those choices. But at least they did what they want, hopefully.
So,
and that's that.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's. I don't want to say the word elitism. I hate using that word, but it's kind of there in the scene, unfortunately. And I'm of the school that if you don't like something, then it's just not for you. But I think you're also kind of limiting yourself on all kinds of music if you're not willing to just give it a chance. Sure, it's not going to be for everybody, but
I agree.
I wish more people would come around to that.
Yeah, man, elitism exists in like every niche subset of art.
Oh yeah.
The smaller the niche, I feel like, the more hardline the fans are, the consumers are of that particular art. And I think there's like some good to be said in people that bore into a subgenre so specifically and so heavily. And I think they feel like a sense of ownership in a way that isn't wrong. Mm-hmm. So I can't really knock people for being really defensive, we get shit from grindcore kids and death metal kids and noise kids. Pretty much any space that we kind of occupy, there's going to be people, purists in those areas that are like, this band's, they're posers, they fucking suck. And that's fine. Like, if I was really, really, really into fucking grindcore to an anal degree, and some band came along that was touted as like the best grindcore band, because people use hyperbole and they're just like, this is the most genre bending, unbelievable fucking band ever, when it never is. That's going to antagonize like a purist who understands that this is not peak grindcore, this is poser shit, so I don't know, I got mixed feelings about it.
Yeah,
pretty much just stay in my own lane and try not to worry about it anymore, because it's kind of upsetting sometimes when someone like specifically shit talks what you're doing, that you put so much time and effort into, but you got to get over it.
Yeah, because you are being vulnerable as a band, like just making this music to put out there, for the world to kind of like either shit on or love, and you never know which is gonna be the coin that lands, tails or heads up. But it's like you said, that's with any art, unfortunately. But metal, to another degree, I feel is just so, it's under a magnifying glass no matter what you do.
Yeah, and there's good and bad to that too. There's a lot of reward to studying and learning the roots of death metal and metal in general. I think there's like a higher bar in terms of like knowing the genre than maybe other genres, and there's a lot of good in that, and of course it's going to come with negatives, like anything else. Elitism isn't really cool, but people that are so dedicated to it that they know every finished demo and like ex-members of blah 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 or whatever, they've like memorized metal archives, like,
which is cool.
It's very cool. It's fucking passion, man.
Yeah.
And passion is high emotion, and that means like elitism and anger. So whatever.
Yeah, trying to just remove yourself from that is the hard part.
Yeah, man. They should be in their own lane, and we be in our own lane. Like, everybody just do their thing and appreciate what they appreciate.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am, but I think that probably comes with age, I guess.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, because I know when I was like 15 to 21 years old, I was an asshole, like, about music, very much so. I wouldn't say elitist, but if I didn't like something, I definitely let the world fucking know about it. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, I shit talked so much, from early teens till like a few years ago. And I still like talking shit, but more in like a jokey kind of way.
Yeah.
Where I'm not really trying to be a dick. It's just amongst my friends. I can shit talk, any bands. But yeah, it's not my thing anymore at all. Definitely not.
So I guess kind of to get a little bit back on track here with the band. What kind of stuff did you guys like push for on Weeping Choir that maybe you learned from the last record to kind of try out?
Well, on the last record, we were right on the heels of putting out the body collabs. So there was definitely less of an emphasis on electronics. I think that's a little more heavy this time.
Cool.
And there wasn't really like an intention of pushing things even further outside of just like the usual. I definitely tried to have as much fun as I could with vocal arrangements. And this time around, I definitely feel like I went for it in a way I felt, I was doing myself a little justice. And I know Spencer was just seeking to kind of combine elements from like the early era of Full of Hell and the latter era. So it was just like more of an attempt at blending, all of the usual elements in just like, the best way that we can in this year,
So, on top of that too, though, I kind of talked about, you guys have this ambiance in the music, but also, visually, like with your record covers too, it kind of embodies like that stark kind of sound that you guys put out there. Like, how should I word this? Like, what do you guys kind of look for when you're trying to come up with like that whole package and the art? Like, is it a conscious thing again, or do you just kind of like let it come naturally of who you pick to do the art? I know you went with the same guy, and this one is the last one, and I'm blanking on his name, which I feel like an asshole for.
No, you're not an asshole. There's a lot of names out there. It's Mark McCoy.
Okay.
And actually, he's like, no doubt, like seriously one of my favorite. He's my favorite contemporary artist, period. And I was always a fan of his label Youth Attack, and always a fan of his art. And I was a fan of his bands when I was in high school. Charles Bronson was probably his most known.
I remember
and like
him.
Dassos and Holy Molar. Yeah, that shit was so snotty and so funny and fast and sick that it was a big deal to me. And just for him to come into his own with his art then later in life, and me as an adult now, I'm a fan of his work. I feel like I've watched him grow, and every phase of it I've been a fan of. So we enlisted Mark around 2014 to do the cover for the Merzbow collab, because it was kind of like a pipe dream, like, oh man, we should get a Mark cover. And I was kind of surprised that he agreed to work with us. I'm not really sure why, but I was like pretty thrilled that he wrote us back and was open to it. And it's always been the same. I give him all the lyrics and all the titles, and I kind of just go over the narrative as best I can, and he distills those words into a physical medium. And Trumpeting Ecstasy is really where he hit like a serious stride, I think, with us.
Okay.
Under no circumstance would I have ever been like, yo, put a fucking nun's head on fire on the cover. That'd be so sick. Because I hate when stuff is on the nose. If it's deliberate, I think it has no finesse at all. And that's what Mark distilled from our lyrics, and it works. I thought it worked so well. I was so thrilled about the record once I saw that artwork. And when we did Weeping Choir, that album was meant to be a companion album to something.
It looks like
the latter. Yeah, exactly. It's like the latter days. There's a lot of things linking the two together. And Mark knew that going in, and Mark distilled all of this aesthetic and all this vibe down into this art. And I think he nailed it. And we just have a lot of similar taste. We're into a lot of the Baroque and religious imagery. And I just think because our taste is so similar, he kind of doesn't even need intimate guidance, because he just gets it. He's definitely a collective part of this band now. Like I believe that he's definitely a part of this. So he's intrinsically linked to how we make our artwork, and how our band is presented to the world.
Yeah, the imagery is very, very visceral. I remember when I saw the cover for the last record, I was like, Jesus, this is fucking insane looking. And on top of that too, it's got a very like David Lynchian kind of vibe. Both of them, especially the new one, man. It really reminds me of like all the weird shit that was in the new season of Twin Peaks, which is really
that
cool.
was really cool season, huh?
Yeah, I was 50-50 on it personally.
Yeah, I was pretty thrilled actually. I love Twin Peaks, but I couldn't believe how hard he actually went, with the supernatural elements.
Man.
And it was in the the first two seasons and Fire Walk with Me, but still there was such a long build that it really felt like he unscrewed the cap and just kind of poured it all out this time. And I have a lot of friends that are pretty polarized about it, but we really enjoyed it. But yeah, Mark's artwork, he works with a lot of mediums, but his cinematic art, which is what he employs with us, it's always photo-based, mixed media.
Mm-hmm.
He really nails it, man. And it's funny because David Lynch is certainly an inspiration, especially in terms of like veiled meaning and narrative structure.
Yeah.
He's always been pretty influential to us. We actually did an Eraserhead shirt when we were like 19 years old. Like it was one of our very, very first Bullet Hell t-shirts.
Nice.
So he's kind of had a place in the aesthetic since the beginning, more or less, more of like a broad stroke kind of way. But yeah, man, Mark's the shit.
So what's your favorite Lynch film then?
I mean, Eraserhead is a pretty obvious choice, but I think it's an obvious choice for a reason.
Yeah.
I think it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, for a first film, it's pretty killer. Like, how many people can tout that as their first like feature film? Not very many.
I mean, he's once in a lifetime. Once probably in 50 generations or more. He's great.
That was the one thing that kind of sucked. Like after he did Inland Empire, it's like Hollywood kind of like disowned him, and he even got so down on wanting to direct himself that he didn't do anything up until this new Twin Peaks, and I think that kind of revitalized him. And last I heard, he's actually working on something else already. And I was like, damn, maybe we're gonna get like a second coming of David Lynch, and people finally like appreciate him a little more.
It's funny how easily Hollywood can bury people if they're not in line with whatever social norms or whatever product they're supposed to be delivering, and it can disrupt careers that people care a lot about. And and then that's just that. But that's kind of a vicious industry. So yeah, I mean, that industry probably doesn't look too kindly upon artists that are extreme like David Lynch.
No, not at all. Especially nowadays.
Yeah. How can you monetize that? I mean, he's very famous and he has a huge following, but generally speaking, you get Christopher Nolan versus David Lynch. Yep. I guess maybe the returns are, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the returns are comparable, but his art is just very extreme. And I love Christopher Nolan for the record, but just saying like, it's not as easy to monetize.
Yeah. I mean, he's not making superhero movies, so nobody's going to give a shit because that's all anybody gives a shit. I mean, myself included. I love the superhero movies, but
me too. It's that's all Spencer cares about is the Marvel movie. That's it. As far as cinema goes.
So I'm sure his anticipation for Avengers is just like through the roof since we're only like a couple weeks away now.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to drive up here for a show tomorrow in Philly, but I think he's like just living at the theater waiting like until the end of the month. I think he's there, camped out.
Yeah, you guys are doing Decibel Beer Fest or
it's
something,
like
right?
the Beer and Metal Fest. We're playing the pre-show, which is Friday night, and it should be really cool. Decibel's been so cool to us the past couple years, especially. Kind of making like little dreams come true. It's pretty sweet. They're good people.
Yeah, I like to me they're one of the last like kind of reputable magazine / journalistic kind of outlets in terms of like the metal scene. There's a lot of other stuff that I'm just like, this is garbage. Like, why does anybody pay attention to this? But everything that they put out, man, it's always solid work. And then their Decibel tour every year is phenomenal. I love everything that they're doing, so it's cool that they're still around.
Yeah, I'm not going to throw dirt on any other magazines, but Decibel is definitely the like truest magazine I think going. It's so clearly a passion project. You can't help but admire it. It's the only magazine I have a subscription to. I don't really give a shit outside of that.
Yeah, I mean those flexi discs alone kind of make it worth it.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. It's a pretty fantastic project. They're like 100 flexi discs deep now, maybe 101.
Yeah,
pretty amazing.
So let's see, you guys are going on tour within the next few months because I'm going to go to one of your shows. It's in
Sweet.
You guys start in like May, the end of May, into June.
Yeah, we starting at Maryland Death Fest.
Cool.
Which is like right in our backyard, more or less. Yeah, it's with Primitive Man and Genocide Pact.
Yeah, that's a fucking.
Those bands are relapse bands now too. So.
Yeah, I think I haven't had anybody from Primitive Man on, but I did have Tim on from Genocide Pact. So.
Sick.
To me, that whole package is fucking probably the sickest tour of the year for me personally. But
that's awesome. Thank you. We toured with Tim and the other dude in the band, Nolan's grindcore band, Disciples of Christ, in Europe for like 5 weeks years ago, and it was it was really fun, but it was booked pretty poorly, so it was kind of like mixed in terms of emotions. If you want to talk low points for us, but. The touring with those dudes was sick as fuck, and I love those guys. So touring with Genocide Pact is something like we've wanted to do since Genocide Pact became a band. So I'm pretty fucking psyched. It's going to be a good time, and you should definitely try to interview Primitive Man because those dudes are really fucking cool. We've known them for a long time.
Dude,
too.
I've been trying so hard. I've like reached out to their PR people and everything, and I've never gotten an answer. I'm like, fuck.
Damn. Well, they're going on tour for like months and months. So
that's the other thing.
I'll say something to Ethan. Yeah, he's got his hands in so many projects, and it's funny. I've been listening to that dude's band since I was a fucking kid too, because he used to have a band called Clinging to the Trees of a Forest Fire.
Yep.
And they were part of like a label that I really liked in high school called DeBello, which was like a bunch of grindcore bands basically. And they were fucking sick. And we played the very first Primitive Man show in Denver. And it was right around the time when they legalized weed. And I just remember it was a DIY space, so I guess people would have smoked anyways. But I think because of just that big explosion of the legalization, I felt like every fucking person in the warehouse was smoking weed at the same time. Well, for me at the time, I was just like, man, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's overwhelming at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Something you mentioned, and I don't want to go out on a down note, so I'll figure out how to turn this into a cool thing. But, you kind of mentioned, doing that Europe tour, and Europe tours are pretty fucking hard because you're shelling out a lot of money to get over there. And you mentioned it kind of being a low point, but was there ever that point in time when you were in the band that you guys were just like, fuck, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? And how did you kind of get that inspiration to just keep going despite all the bullshit that was kind of going on?
Dude, fuck yes, we have had moments like that. It's particularly me and Spencer. Not that Dave doesn't care, because he definitely cares intensely.
Sure.
But I just feel like me and Spencer are very anxious dudes, and we do a lot of the logistics. So the weight of that disaster would fall heaviest on us at the time. And there have been many moments where things get really fucked up. And I think we've tempered ourselves over the years to a point where I think we can digest errors like that and disasters like that without feeling like existentially fucked. But I think every band out there that's DIY can completely relate to me when I say that there will come a moment on your tour when something will go wrong and you will be completely fucked and you definitely feel like quitting. And I feel like, if you can come out on the other side of that, you're better for it. But man, it's fucked up at the time. All you can do is really rationalize.
Yeah.
And, just try and make the next step, whatever that might be. And it's funny because, like, on that tour specifically, I just remember the shows were really bad and the cops were fucking with us. Like, it seemed like constantly, because we were overweight and all these things. There's just, Germany has very strict laws about, like, van weight, and we had a lot of shit in the van and a lot of people. And it just seemed like things were just stacking up, and it was so hard to get everybody to like, be on time for things when we were trying to, like, make ferries and all this shit.
Oh yeah,
and
that's
just
a
came
nightmare.
to a breaking point where we just ended up screaming at each other, and it was really fucking depressing because, like, you see something you care so intensely about shattering right in front of your eyes.
Yeah,
and it's fucked up if you're very passionate about your band, because, like, I don't have it. Like, I have a lot to be thankful for, but this is, like, my thing. I love this so much. Like, it's not like just like a hobby. It's something you're obsessed with and you pour so much time into, and you don't know what you do without. And then to see it kind of like, it's like seeing your life flash before your eyes, dude, seriously. But, usually in the wake of those fights, it like fizzles, and then we just, fuck it, I don't care. Like, it's okay. Like, I'm sorry. And we work it out. But, it happens less nowadays, but there's still terse moments. Shit goes wrong all the time.
Yeah.
The best, I wouldn't trade away those moments though, because, the humility that you gain from being subjected to failure over and over again is character building if it doesn't, ruin your outlook. And there's all different kinds of failure. If you feel burned out after 2 years straight of touring and you got all kinds of shit going on at home, sometimes you, like, wonder if you're still getting joy out of this thing that you're subjecting yourself to. But thankfully, for me, my perspective right now is quite positive. I feel like I've learned a lot from my peers and learned a lot from my failures, and DIY is good for that. I think not to, like, run on too much of a tangent, but I think if
no,
you're handling these things with, like, an instant booking agent and instant record deal or whatever, I'm not trying to judge either, but I feel like you don't really understand. I think you're more prone to thinking too highly of yourself, because I don't think anyone has deserved anything. There are a lot of talented people that are much more talented than we are that never get their due, and they never get to do half the 1,000 sick-ass things we've gotten to do. And who's to say what's fair? Nobody deserves shit, and I think that people forget what a privilege it is sometimes. I'm not saying you can't, stand up for yourself and get what you are deserved, in an agreement or something, but people forget what a privilege it is. And that was what was drawn. That's what drew me to punk and hardcore, especially, and keeps it in the back of my mind, is that is a medium for all people. Like, there's a huge emphasis on that, and that, a little more simplistic formula with the music means that anybody can get up on that stage and pick up an instrument and play, and nobody is above another person. And it's not like that in all genres, but I think that's an important part of the morality in that kind of DIY scene. And failure is a huge part of that. You know, you got to keep the whole outlook in like a very muted perspective. I hate ego. It's just like, it's something everybody should fight against constantly.
Yeah, and it definitely happens. I know in my short kind of span of touring with bands, I ran into bands that thought they were a little bit bigger than they should be, and just shit talking every other band on the package.
Dude,
and
that shit's embarrassing, dude. I can't even believe it. We never experienced anything like that for years because we never did package tours.
Yeah.
Because we just never had a booking agent that we trusted at all or anything. So,
which is smart.
When we finally started doing package tours, we got pretty lucky almost all the time. There's only been a couple instances where I'm like, holy shit, these guys are delusional. I cannot believe what I'm watching. And it's kind of validating to see someone that's that delusional, and you know they're going to fall on their face because, you know, karma's kind of a real thing in a sense, and that shit comes around.
Yeah.
And it's fucking sweet when it comes around, dude. Watching some egomaniac fall on his face.
To be fair, the band that I'm thinking of in my head, they have not put out a record in, let's see, it must have been 10 years since we did that tour with them, and they've done nothing since then. So, you know, they can shit talk everybody on that tour, but they're not the ones still making music, you know?
It's delusional. I kind of live for those moments nowadays because, you know, amongst my friend group, we store those hilarious interactions with like big-headed people, and we just reference them forever. So those people hold a special place in our hearts, and I know I will encounter more of them, and I just hope I never become one of them. That's like one of my greatest fears, to be rude to another like that. It would be a pretty sad situation to be in.
Well, you don't seem like the type of guy that would, so I don't think you have to worry about that.
You just wait. Give me like a year or two.
Okay.
When we're a couple records into this Relapse contract, I'm going to be a fucking asshole.
Oh, cool. You're going to do like a solo project?
Yeah. I almost named somebody's name. It's like a notorious asshole, but I'm going to go like real fucking crazy. It's going to be completely neurotic. I'm going to burn a cross into my head. Yeah, it's going to be nuts.
Oh, shit. Well, Dylan, I don't want to take up any more of your time, man, but I'm having an excellent time talking to you here. This has been a fucking awesome podcast, and I'm glad I got to chat to you about like everything that you guys are doing right now, because I'm like seriously really stoked for this record. I thought last year was really good for metal releases, but man, this year is like kind of blowing everything out of the water, and I'm just like, everything that I hear,
it's really exciting.
Fuck, so good.
I'm glad you're excited for it, but you're right, man. Like, there's always so much to consume, and I just think we're in a very cool time. There's always something going on.
Yeah.
You just need to look for it. I feel like there's so much shit. I'm always missing stuff.
Same here. I'm always like, too worried about like new stuff that I have to get to listen to, or worrying about listening to old stuff that I have to listen to for the podcast. And it's just like, there's always something that I'm missing. And then I'll hear it later and I'm like, fuck, why didn't I check this out?
Did you hear that new Pissgrave album?
I did, actually. It's pretty fucking gnarly.
I love that. Yeah, I love that band. They're a great band. Perfectly dialed in.
That
as far
cover,
as like
though.
focus, what they're doing. Well, oh yeah. I mean, at this point, I was kind of expecting nothing less than that.
I know.
They're all like that. I think the one where the guy melted in his own bathtub is way more disgusting to me personally.
Yeah.
Just the brown gore sludge and his melted ass body. Pretty heavy shit.
Yeah, I think I'm the opposite
not
on you, man. That just bloody smashed face fucks me up, but I see the guy and all the shit and rotting flesh. It's just like, all right, it's a little gooey.
Yeah, it's really funny when people complain though, especially like how have you not been exposed to this kind of stuff on like Rotten.com?
Yep.
Or from any number of like gore grind bands over the years, or from any brutal death metal bands. Like, I don't know. It just, the hate kind of on the art kind of blew my mind.
I mean, hey,
and
man.
People, yeah, whatever. It's
Mayhem started it, if you really think about it, with that bootleg where they put Dead on the cover.
Like dude, that's so much more fucked up. That was their friend.
Yep.
Like, that after that, if that was like, if you were in that scene when that record was released like that, and you're shocked at Pissgrave, I just don't understand.
Yeah,
because that's way more fucked up.
Plus, that it just kind of goes hand in hand with like the extremity of heavy metal too. It's just the extremity of the covers, depending on what kind of music you're playing. But
yeah, and Pissgrave has a very focused vision.
Good album.
And it's meant to be tasteless, and I think they nail it. And there's no compromise there, and people kind of miss the point. It's funny when something is intentionally lowbrow and somehow it still goes over people's heads.
Yeah. What other stuff?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. I guess. Well, I guess real quick, what other stuff has kind of caught your ear this year so far?
Well, something that hasn't come out yet that I know I'm going to be really freaking out about is the new Lingua Ignota record. Okay. Not metal, but very heavy death industrial. Who knows what it'll even sound like? I've only heard one song, but she's a genius for sure, and she sings on our new record too.
Oh, nice.
And it's like it's like the centerpiece of the record, and I think she made the song just like stellar, like huge contribution, like amazing. So I'm really hyped for her record. Profound Lore's doing that. And I heard the song from that band Fetid this morning. That sounded really sick. That band's pretty great. I don't know. I got to think of some other stuff. I've been listening to a lot of hip hop lately, but
nice.
Not as much death metal. But a band that I hadn't listened to the entire record. It came out last year. Is that last Imperial Triumphant record?
Oh,
I think that record
so
is really
good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, they kind of have like a weird scrunky, like dysrhythmia, like Gorguts kind of vibe, like almost in a Portal sense, but it's got its own thing, and it leans way more heavily on jazz. And I fucking love horns and heavy music. It's a really cool record.
Me too, man.
And I heard at Roadburn, their aesthetic, they wear those like crazy crafted gold masks.
Yep.
Someone told me that at their Roadburn performance, they're passing out like hundreds of masks because they're playing in like X size rooms, so it's like fits 400 people or something. And they're passing out like 400 of these masks. So everyone in the room, it's going to be like some fucked up gala, basically. Everyone in the room will be wearing these masks. Those guys put a lot of attention into aesthetic and the presentation of their band, like to the full degree. Like they're all the way with it. So I think that's pretty fantastic. I hope to see pictures or video.
Yeah, they're one of those bands I still haven't seen live yet, but I got to talk to them last year before their record came out, and man, just hearing like their jazz sensibilities, how they kind of feel and talk about the music, I was like, damn, okay, this makes sense. It just clicks. And I like the fact that they're doing something so completely different from what a lot of other bands are doing, because that's rare these days.
Yeah, they definitely put their own spin on it. I think it's really, really cool. And like a post, I guess like kind of a band I'm getting into late. That band Rosetta is really good. It's like a post-metal band. And I always knew their name, and I heard them like very small amounts, years ago. And I always thought it was cool. But now I have Spotify Premium, for the first time ever. And it's giving me like a free dive into full albums. And Rosetta is one of those bands where I actually sat down and really gave it a deep dive, and their music is amazing. Big vision, pretty lush, has heavy moments.
Yeah.
It's like cool blend of like, it's like, I think they fit pretty firmly into like the post-metal category, like alongside like an ISIS or something. Yeah, they're pretty great, man.
Awesome, man. That's cool. I like hearing what other people are like kind of listen to, because sometimes it gives me things to check out too, and I always love doing that. So I definitely want to check out a couple things you mentioned there after we're done with this.
Yeah, man.
So.
Definitely.
Well, dude, thank you. Seriously, thank you so much for doing this, man. I really appreciate all your time. And May 17th is when the record comes out, right?
Yep, that's the day. And thanks for having me, man. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, I'll come up and meet you in person, and I think June is when you guys are coming to my area, so I'll be sure to
where do you live?
I live in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but I think you guys are playing Nashville, so it's only like an hour and a half away.
Do you want to hear something? I don't know if this will surprise you, but we've played Chattanooga like 4 times.
Really? I just moved back here a year ago. I've been away for quite a while.
Do you know the Antarctica, the punk house?
Yes, I do.
We've played there like 4 times.
Holy shit!
All right, we have a friend that lives in Chattanooga. I haven't spoken to him in years. Awesome guy. but yeah, when we first started our band, like just like a 7-inch out, Chattanooga just had like a sick thing going on, and my friend, he was always very helpful to us and would book our shows there. And that, yeah, we played that place a lot. I think the dude that lived there, his name was Tom. It was a cool house.
That sounds
I don't know.
About
it's funny.
Right. Yeah.
It's funny. Like 10 years down the line, being like, "Yo, you wouldn't know this, but 8 years ago we played your town." I like doing that to people.
Yeah, and that would have been like right when I just moved away from here too, so I wouldn't have even been here. Man, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah. Plus, there can't have been that many people at the show. I don't think any of the shows. Like, they were awesome shows, but you know what I mean. It was It wasn't something where I feel like everybody really knew about it.
There's not much of a scene here. There never has been, unfortunately.
Yeah, I like that Riverwalk area though. It's nice down there.
Oh man, that's been my favorite part about being back here. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I don't blame you, man. But yeah, that's cool. That Nashville show, I guess, is what you're going to. That's gonna be pretty sick.
Yeah.
It's, dude, last time we played there, it was with Gay Creeper last year, and it was the hottest fucking show, even hotter than like Southeast Asia during the rainy season. Like, hot as fuck. The hottest experience I've ever had. I thought I was gonna die. I don't know how like the bigger dudes on our tour we were reacting to that and not like keeling over. It was so fucking hot. So I think it's going to be uncomfortable again.
Yeah, and that's like almost the height of summer too around here. Fuck.
Yeah, and it's funny because they have like a pretty beast air conditioning system, and it was pumping out like the most frigid fucking air before the doors opened, and it was like to no avail. It didn't make a fucking difference during the show.
Damn it.
So yeah, get ready for that. At least you can sweat off some weight or sweat out the toxins. You know, it's good for you.
It's true. Yeah, and I don't think I've ever been to that venue either. Now that I think about it,
it's cool. It's like it fits like a couple hundred people. It's pretty small, and yeah, I've played there a lot too. That place fucking rules. So I think that'll be a cool show.
Awesome. I'm definitely looking forward to it, man.
Great, man.
All right.
Be excellent to each other. And